Hey, welcome to another episode of AWSP TV. We are super excited to have a special guest in our studio today to talk to us about the important role students play when you are examining a potential bell schedule change as we wrestle with this 24 credits. I'm going to introduce to you my special guest. Her name is Alexis Nevy. And Alexis is a senior over at Avanti High School here in the Olympia School District. Alexis, say hi.
Hello.
That's good.
What did you, just hello?
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, thank you.
She was super excited to come do this interview because she didn't really agree to it, but here we are. I said, we'd love to have your voice so that you could be the voice of students around the state about this scheduling issue. So I'm just going to explain a little bit how we met so that people understand why you're sitting in this chair. I was doing a session at the WASDA conference earlier this year on 24 credits and bell schedules. And it was so refreshing to look up in this giant auditorium of an audience to see student faces. And you probably don't remember this, but one of the very first questions I asked the audience in that session, you were one of the first hands in the air to offer some input into the entire room.
I do not remember that.
Well,
was it something amazingly insightful?
Well, it is, and that's why you're here today.
Okay, good.
So thanks for being here.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
And I promise we won't bite. We'll make this pain-free, and it's just a little casual conversation about what it's like to be a student in the system today with all the pressures and everything that's happening in the system as you guys are all preparing to head off into the world. We would love to hear from you around some of the things that us adults should consider as we think about blowing up the traditional system.
Well, I think one of the most important things is that students always feel like they're getting support, especially when they have this new expectation of the 24 credits requirement. I feel like you can keep adding more and more work on them, but somewhere there's got to be a place to make them feel like they're understood and they're supported in all that they're trying to do. I think that's probably the biggest core factor.
Yeah, so you're here today because you've kind of had a different path through the system.
Definitely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your K12 journey, if you don't mind, and where you are today and a little bit about that school that you're at.
So I was a very quiet, observative child, and so when my parents
You're
were
on TV right now. Isn't that funny that you're a quiet?
It is. I've definitely grown a lot, and my high school experience is a big part of that. But when I was little, my parents had to look into all these different alternative options because they knew that the standard path would just be way too overwhelming for me, and it would be too much for me to handle. So I started at the Olympia Waldorf School. And then from there, I just pretty much changed schools every 2 years, just trying out tons of different alternative things in the community. Ended up at Orla for a little while, and then I found Avanti. And when I graduated 6th grade from Olympia Waldorf again, 8th grade from Olympia Waldorf, we started looking at high schools, and there was a part of me that was like, okay, maybe I'm ready to try Oli. Because that was in our district area, but then as we got closer, I just realized it was going to be way too much people, especially coming from such a small school background. And my mom had some connections, and she knew about Avanti, and we went and checked it out. And I just remember that the second I stepped through that door, I was like, "Yep, this is where I want to be." It just was such a different energy than anywhere else I'd been before, even all the alternative schools. And I met with the principal, and we had a nice interview, and I just felt like the questions he was asking me and what he was asking me to reflect upon was all due to my character, because they wanted to know me personally. And I felt like that was a really important thing that I was looking for. And to start high school, which is such a big experience, I wanted to be somewhere where I could start stepping out of that comfort zone and really grow into who I wanted to be. So that's why I went to Avanti, and it was I have not even for a second regretted it. It's the best decision I've ever made. So yeah.
Awesome. So we have 295 school districts in the state of Washington, a whole bunch of private schools, and a lot of technical and alternative settings. Avanti is classified as an alternative high school. I mean, if we were to label it with something. So can you describe for the people watching this, what makes Avanti alternative? Why is it alternative? Like, talk about the schedule, your flow. What does that look like to be a learner at Avanti?
Well, I think partially why it's categorized under alternative is that we do pretty much everything different, starting with what you said, the schedule. So we're on a quarter system, and each of our students, so you earn 0.5 credit every class you take every quarter. And with the way that works out, at least with the 22 credit graduation requirement, it was each student just has to take at least 3 classes a quarter, which allows for a lot of flexibility in that student's life. Like, they can get a job, or they can volunteer, or sleep, because I feel like that's really important too, and really give them more experiences outside of the school place, as well as like the holding they need in class. Students are also allowed to take up to 4 classes there if they want to. Personally, I want to be there as much as I can, so I've always done 4. And it just ends up working out really wonderfully. And students can choose if they want to be a morning student, so they can come in the morning, the first half of our day, which is from 8:20 to 11, or they can choose to come in the afternoon, which is from 11:40 to 2:20, which I just feel like is an amazing luxury to have that decision over your own life, or whatever works with like family schedules or that kind of thing. And then we go into like our actual classes. And our students all have the choice of taking either an independent course or a teacher-led course. And really what independent means is that the teacher is still there, obviously, to help them the entire time and give tests and all of that kind of thing. But it means that the student has control over their own pacing. So some students at Avanti tend to go faster, and that just works for them. It doesn't mean they're not doing enough work or anything. It just means that their brain understands that material and can move faster than other students. And so that's like what a lot of our students really value. And then on the other hand, students can also take a little more time and stretch it out, and the teacher is there for them the entire time. And because the class schedule is so flexible, they're able to make up any extra time they had to spend on that, and it can be more personalized. Like, they can work one-on-one with the teacher during a class period rather than just being 1 in like 30. Because we are divided in 2 halves, and because we're divided in 2 halves and lots of our students do running start, it's a lot smaller student to teacher ratio. Also, we're just a really small school. And I think that's also another thing that makes us very alternative in that mindset too. There's a lot less of us, and so there's a lot more recognition for each one of us, which I think is really important. And then, of course, we have the teacher-led classes as well, and that's just more of a standard lecture and homework and all of that kind of thing. So it's just very student-driven. Like, we want you to care about what you're doing, and that's kind of our focus. So.
Well, you said so much right there in a great way that's why you're sitting here today. So when you think about the answer that you just gave to that question about what is Avanti, how much of what you just described could be transferred to the traditional system? You know, you and I talked about you have friends that are out in the traditional system, so without naming schools that they're at, think about all the kids in the state of Washington as they are going to their school, and they're going to kind of that lockstep traditional system that's in place. What lessons could those systems learn from what you just described to me? What can be transferred from Avanti to the traditional system?
Well, I think one of the big things that makes Avanti work is that our students are feeling passionate about what they're choosing, what classes they're choosing to take, or that kind of thing. And I notice in some other settings, classes are chosen for all the students because it's overwhelming and there's so much you have to choose from. But one of those really important, like, independent skills is actually being able to look at your own schedule and apply that to what you need to be doing in school. So I feel like that's a really powerful thing that's, like, it could be pretty simple to transfer to other schools in our district or other districts across the state. I would say like looking at different systems other than just semester systems could be a really easy way to add those extra credits you need to get in.
So those big grading chunks could be defined differently?
Right, okay. Exactly. And I feel like that's kind of an overwhelming thought to get into, but in general, once you just do it, I feel like it could be a lot better. And I think it's really important for all students to be able to feel like they are living their own lives as well as living it for school as well, because that's a lot.
Yeah.
And just that, like, focus on independence for yourself, or even just a little bit, like getting to choose what you want to do or what classes work in your current schedule, can really make a big effect. Or if students go to a school with many different teachers for each subject, maybe they know they work better with a certain teacher, and so being able to choose those classes could be really important for their connections to the school as well.
So you mentioned one point that you like sleep.
I do.
So there's a lot of research out there saying that teenagers need to sleep in. Is it possible for us adults to design a system where if I'm one of those that needs my sleep, could a traditional school offer that staggered start like what you described at Avanti?
I think a lot of districts right now are working on that, ours included. I do think it's possible. I think it's going to take a lot of work, but I do think it's possible. Honestly, I feel like going to a trimester system or a quarter system could really help with that. It means there could be less hours of school each day, so it still allows students to sleep in more in the morning, but they don't get out so late in the afternoon that it cuts into extracurriculars or work, or homework for that matter, which I feel like is one of the main issues right now when discussing later start times. I also think that to actually make a difference in student sleep, it's going to be really important to not just have a later start time by half an hour, but like, actually give them some more time, because you still have to get ready a couple hours before you go to school, and taking that into account as well, instead of, or like if you take the bus, having that time calculated, so it's not just making a little difference. If we're going to do it, let's do it actually.
Let's talk about stress and anxiety.
Okay.
That's an easy topic, right?
I mean, yeah, I think everyone's a little bit, has some experience with that.
So what can we do as adults to create a system that reduces stress for kids?
Another big question.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a few.
I think that one major thing about being a student is feeling like some of their teachers may not see their whole experience or all that they're working on. So oftentimes, like, if I get a big homework load from one class or something, I'm like, oh, that teacher just doesn't get that I have other classes too, like that kind of thing. And I know it may not be possible for like teachers to coordinate, but even just a second where a teacher stands up there and is like, geez, I know I'm giving you so much work right now, but like I recognize that you're doing a lot and I appreciate that this means something to you as well. I think that changed the whole dynamic with homework, especially for students. And it becomes less of like a stress and, oh, someone's forcing me to do this, and more like, okay, they see what's happening and they're telling me this is meaningful and here's why. And that's what I feel like really gets into the whole relevance issue too. For me, I'm a whole lot more stressed if I feel like what I'm learning has absolutely no place in my future, or like I'll never use this again, or I don't understand why I have to learn this because it doesn't seem to fit what I want to learn about in my future or do in my future. And so I feel like even just creating some sort of relevance is really important, because for me, then I feel like it's not so stressful that someone else is controlling my life, but like I'm controlling my life and I get to like grow from that experience. Yeah, did that kind of answer your question?
It does. I mean, if you think about the amount of stress and anxiety that you experience at Avanti, now pick yourself up and plop yourself into the system that most of your peers are sitting in. How does that make you feel, thinking about if you were in that as you are preparing to go off into college, hopefully, your life after high school? What do you know they're experiencing?
A lot more class periods in a day, typically like 6. I feel like if you start out with one class and for some reason you feel stressed coming out of that class, then you have to carry that through the entire day. And it just keeps building, which makes it worse. And yeah, I just can't imagine trying to juggle that much. And just not being able to actually sit in that one experience of whatever that one first class was or second class was, because you have to move on pretty quickly to that next course. I think it's really amazing that students are able to shift their minds from one topic to another like every hour of the day. That's a pretty good skill to have, but I think that that can cause a lot of anxiety. Personally, whenever there's a chance where teachers have time to just say, are there any questions, or do you have any concerns about this, or what's bugging you when you think about this, or what is stressing you, they can just ask that kind of thing too. And I really appreciate when my teachers are able to hear those concerns and then really address them. Oftentimes students will be just sharing how maybe that one class has a lot of stuff in 1 week, and maybe then they can adjust with the teacher and talk with them as a whole class so that everyone can benefit from that. And I know with a lot more students that's a lot more challenging, but I think that even just that recognition is so important. And there's always the breathing exercises, so you can try and calm down. But sometimes it's just too much to do that.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about time, and we adults we've done a lot to education, reform, new initiatives, all sorts of things to try and help students be successful. But one of the things we haven't really addressed as a system is time, and how time is defined. What you just described is, though, an easy way to reduce anxiety and stress in the system is for the adults to think about time differently. So at Avanti, it sounds like there's space available for you to decompress, or space available for you to have a relationship with your teacher, to where they might recognize, oh, she's a little off today, or I can sense that something's wrong or eating away at her. She's not all there focused.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So how long is a period? What does a class period look like?
I think it's an hour and 5 minutes, or 55 minutes per class period, because we have a 5-minute passing period. And you touched on something that I didn't get into at all, but as part of our schedule, we actually don't have classes on Fridays, because that is a time where teachers actually take a chance and they have their teacher meetings in the morning so that they can all plan out what they are hoping to accomplish in the week. They talk about all of the students individually and how they're doing with all their classes. And then in the afternoon, students have the opportunity to go in and talk with their teachers. And honestly, that's where the connections are really built. Because
on Friday afternoons.
Yeah. It's amazing. You go in there on Friday and all the students are just lounging around. They're all working on homework. That really inspires me, because I've never seen students together actually being productive. And I think that that's amazing. And the teachers all have their classrooms open so that you can ask them whatever questions you want. I usually take some time and just go visit with each of the teachers because, well, one, I need a study break. And then two, I like to hear about what's going on in their lives and how they're doing. And that's a chance where students can really be like, okay, this is what's not working for me. I need help. And then you can come up with a plan with your teacher. And especially in the independent learning settings, that's pretty easy to make adjustments about, oh, let's let go of some of this work and you can do it next week or something like that. Or you need to step it up a little bit, so we're going to add some more this week and I'm going to help you get this ready for this test. Yeah, and it's amazing because you can also meet so many students that you don't see if you only do afternoon classes or you only do morning classes, and it really builds the sense of community going on. Plus the art room is always open, and students who don't have homework and just want to hang out can go in and do art, which is really cool. So I feel like that's where the big connection part comes in, and that's kind of a utopia kind of idea, but I think that that's really important to have that opportunity to find connection. So
connections,
yeah,
aka relationships, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think we've put enough space in the system for kids to connect or have relationships with the adults in their lives? I mean, it sounds like you have it at Avanti, but would your friends in the traditional system speak with such passion around the relationships that they have?
I think the answer, unfortunately, has to be a pretty solid no. I know that some teachers at other schools do try and focus on that, and I feel like that's really important, what they're working on. But unfortunately, no. They're given these huge loads of information that they have to teach their students, and only like an hour a day to do that. And so it's already an incredible ask that we're, asking them. And it doesn't leave a lot of time for them to build that connection, especially when they have, 30 to 50 students in each class. Like that's a huge amount to remember, especially like, the whole name thing. I'm really bad with names. Like that would be a nightmare. But I think at the same time, even just those little connections makes the biggest difference. And that's one of the main reasons I actually chose Avanti. For me, I have to find relevance in what I'm doing, or like a reason to do it. And I'm so dedicated to that. But if there's not one, then there's not as much, I don't really care about doing it. But as soon as I see my teachers and they see me and I get to know them, then I'm not only wanting to do it to help myself, but I'm wanting to show them that I can do it. And I think that that's really important for all students to have that kind of drive, or feel like someone actually cares if they're failing or if they're struggling, or even if they're doing great, to have someone care and know them on at least a first name basis. That can change everything. So yes, that's a lot of names to learn, but I feel like that's a really important change that could be made. And especially if you're a student in the class, a second time or something, just having that teacher recognize you again, even if you didn't really speak up that much, so powerful. And I feel like that can really even just change a student's life. It doesn't mean you have to compliment them or anything. Just saying their name can be the biggest difference. Oh, look, they saw me, kind of thing. Especially when you're a student in a sea of all those other students. So.
And I hear a lot from teachers, principals, students out in the traditional system. They want those relationships.
Oh, yeah.
They would love to have a system like that. And a lot of them have found ways to create that and create the space because they know that's the driver. Because I don't want anybody thinking that the traditional system's bad, and that's not what this is about. But I think the larger question is, how do we create space in that larger system for relationships? That's the driver. How do we do that? How do we redefine time so that if you are in that 6-period system or 7 or 8-period system, where you've got all these transitions and all of these students in your class, or you have 8 different teachers that you're, how do we create space for relationships? And you don't necessarily have the answer to that question. That's a rhetorical question for the viewer, but that's what we're getting at.
I think one way, which is kind of also a pain for students, but group projects. I mean, I know they suck, but they do build these group bonding kind of things, especially if the teacher is involved in helping them. So any kind of hands-on work can really change everything. And you can still get all your material across, but I feel like that's one really easy way to implement that. But coming up with something creative or something they haven't done before. I mean, if you're teaching science or math or any of that kind of thing, you can incorporate something that's hands-on, try this out, or maybe do an experiment or build something if it's math, but especially if it's student idea driven. Again, I have to apologize because I know students are maybe hearing this and be please stop talking. We don't ever want to do this, because it's a lot of pressure to try and come up with an idea or be asked to do something like that. But at the same time, in the end, you remember those names, you remember those faces. That teacher meant something to you because she turned you on to this different project, or that kind of thing. And they remember you too because you had that good idea, or you helped contribute to this part of the project. I feel like that's kind of a simple one that could be implemented in there. So,
do you work outside of school?
I used to. I can't anymore. I also do full-time running start as well as going to Avanti, so my schedule's pretty full, especially being a senior with all of my applications.
Yeah.
So not anymore, no.
So what do you think, and I'm sure you have friends that work, but what do you think we could do as a system to better honor and support those students that have to work or are working?
Yeah, I feel so much for those students. I do have a lot of friends who work.
And are they getting credit for work? Do they get credit, work experience credit, or?
Yeah, at Avanti they do. So you need a certain amount of elective credit to graduate. And at Avanti, a portion of that elective credit is actually what we call service learning credit. And so that's specifically supposed to be volunteer work. But we're supposed to have at least 75 hours where we're out in the community volunteering. And they set us up right in the beginning. So they have teachers who will take a group out and be like, okay, here's a really cool organization. You can work here if you want. And they do that for one day, and then you get to choose where you want to be. And then after you finish your volunteer work, if you are working pretty consistently, you set up a plan with your advisor, and they give you like an hour log sheet, and then you can get credit for that. And I think that's really important. And that's an easy thing. Like, that's the best kind of elective credit you could get, honestly, because then you're getting experience, and then when you like go to apply for jobs, like then you have working experience already. And I think that's something that should be better supported by schools. I mean, we'll get to the time commitment part in a bit, but like just getting that incentive. So many students who don't work that I talk to want to work and don't feel like they have the time to offer that because they need those extra classes. But if they could be working like they want to or earning money, and that's an important skill, and then getting that applied to their credits.
So it's the value of work versus the value of required classes.
Exactly. I think there would probably have to be a limit on how much could count, because otherwise then why not just work the whole time for everything? But I do think it's an important part, and that it should really be better supported. As of like the time piece, I think that when we start looking at these schedule changes or focusing on trying to shift so that students spend less time in classes, even with the higher expectance of credits, that's going to help with the whole working thing. Other than that, I mean, we got to have lives too. So I think that's often left to the back shelf, but still.
Well, you at this giant conference chose to come to a breakout session on transforming the traditional high school and helping adults think out of the box. So you ready to get crazy with me?
Okay, let's do it.
So if we were to design, completely throw out the old delivery model for high school, what should go into the new model? Don't describe Avanti, or maybe but think about the whole system. What could we do if we thought, what is possible in a new system to support students who are going to either go into careers or college or a combination of both? What could we do that's just crazy out of the box as far as creating a new system?
Well, I think the first step is include many students in that creation of a new system, because truly they're going to know what they want to see.
So engage student voice.
Yeah, definitely. Gotcha. Personally, I think more control to the students. I know it can be scary, but at the same time, when you feel more in control, even in your own life, it makes you feel more like you're engaged and dedicated to what you're doing. So student, I guess. A
little more student ownership.
Yeah, or independence, and then like you said, ownership. If they're not following through, then that's on them too, which is an important life lesson as well.
Okay, so student voice, student kind of control.
I think that the relationships piece that we touched on is a really important part in the perfect realm.
That's what we're describing here. So time for relationships.
Lots of time for passion projects or that kind of thing. Actually learning about the community around you and how you fit into that whole equation would be a huge one, because that just feels like it better prepares you for everything. So any kind of thing that, but I feel like the student choice or student-driven part of that is really important, because you can't hand someone a passion project and be like, here, you like this now. Do it now. So that's kind of, that comes with.
But
the
if they had a
student.
menu of things they could choose
Right.
from that put them out in the community.
That could totally help, something like that. And I feel like going off of that, just more experience out in the field, having more relevant subjects in classes. Even in history, you can relate it to what's going on now. Just that kind of thing helps you feel more connected to the world you're in and not feel like it's only relevant to people like many generations ago. So that's a big one. Just trying to find relevance in whatever topic you're discussing, even though you have to have those main core subjects.
Yeah.
Trying to make them so that it still feels like they're important.
And then how should we deal with time?
Well, I guess we're still doing the perfect world thing,
Mhm.
right? So honestly, I think it's really important for students to sleep in, but not sacrificing that end of the afternoon thing. So I would say switching to a different system, so trimester, quarter, having less classes each day, and actually getting time for life is really important. And that also extends the time where students can be out in the community or trying to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay.
I think that's,
That's the perfect system.
yeah.
All right. Well, Alexis, I really appreciate you being here today and
Thank you.
agreeing to do this on behalf of all the students in the state of Washington, which is awesome. Nobody comes into the studio without one final question.
Okay.
And the question is, when you think back through your experience, as a student, can you think of a principal in your life who had an impact on you or influenced you, and it's been a positive influence to launches you off into your life? Can you name a principal?
Yes, I think my clear answer would be Michael Velasquez, who is the principal of Avanti. I am so grateful for how he is able to see all of his students so individually and really support the diversity of Avanti and trying to keep it, or helping to keep it, very student-based and like a place where students can all feel really safe and really held. I think that is just a crazy task for one person to be trying to do. And of course he has an amazing support system, but like what a goal to strive towards. And I think that that's really amazing, and he balances it all really well. So definitely Mike.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of AWSP TV. I think the big takeaway here is student voice. If you haven't formed a committee of students to examine reimagining the system, here's a great example of the perspective that students will bring into that planning process. We'll see you again at our next episode, hopefully with Governor Jay Inslee.